Sup, y'all? I am your host, Taylor Onion. This is Hang Time. We are back this week with Dr. Kyra Kendrick. She is the Vice President of Member and Partner Strategy at the Pro Sports Assembly, which is the industry association for professional sports organizations and business leaders at U.S.-based professional teams, leagues, unions, and venues. Dr. Kendrick, let's get some hang time. Welcome.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you as well. So you started off like I did, working in academics for college athletics. What drew you to want to start a career working in sports to begin with?
Well, when you're as seasoned as I am, especially when I started college, nobody tells you that you can work in the college space for an extended period of time, especially once you graduate. And luckily enough, I had a supervisor who had been in the higher ed space, and he said to me, I think you'd be great working in this space once you graduate. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that was an option. But now that you're expanding my horizons right now, I appreciate that. And with that, also had a friend who worked in the football office. And so I kind of got a little combination of both. I was a very involved student, even though I wasn't a student athlete. I mean, I had a hand in everything. I served on student government. I was an RA. I volunteered in the football office. So I felt like I had a really well-rounded experience. And I realized that I could work in college, I can work in sport moving forward. That interests me. It certainly piqued my interest and made me do a little more research on what that looks like.
You've worked at some pretty big football schools, LSU, Ole Miss, obviously most recently. Were you somewhere before you were at LSU?
I was in undergrad at Louisville.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
So again, another big football school, which was that part of what drew you to want to move into campus recruiting? So you went from academics to
Mhm.
the recruiting side. What prompted that?
When I was at LSU, I actually was an assistant academic counselor, so with football. And so I definitely got small doses of it, here and there. But when I got to Ole Miss, I was still working in academics, and I was presented with the opportunity to move over into football specifically. And so I, again, shout out to the then athletic director, Ross Bjork, and the then SWA, Lynette Johnson, who saw something in me that said, hey, we think you could have success in this space. And ironically, before I took the role, it was a very tumultuous time because I was in school working on my doctorate, and I was working full time, and my dad ended up passing away, while we were on a family vacation. So
Oh my gosh.
it, you know, I those types of situations, they like mold you and prepare you for what's to come.
Sure.
And while at the time I didn't feel that way, I think what it did outside of, having the academic background was prepare me for what's to come when you work sports specific, especially in football, in a place where that is the bread and butter.
Yeah, absolutely. SEC football is, I mean, are there words to compare it to other to other football? But to work in recruiting in that
Yeah,
space
I don't think so.
is right, right. But I have to, before we move on, so I have to give I didn't realize that Ross Bjork would have been the AD at that time. So I have to give a shout out because I think he finished his master's from Western Illinois University. So fellow Leathernecks who are listening will appreciate that.
Love that.
Um, but at some point, again, so the recruiting stuff, you spent, what did we say, 2.5 years working in
Yeah,
recruiting?
yeah. So I was at Ole Miss for about 2.5, 3 years while I was there, and then I left Ole Miss and went to work at IU Bloomington briefly, and then I left IU Bloomington and went to work at UNC Chapel Hill under the legendary Mac Brown. So
Yeah,
I had many years of recruiting experience while I was,
yeah.
moving throughout this industry.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And then after you were at UNC, then is when you made the move to women leaders and
Yes.
started kind of the trajectory that you're on now, if you will. So working in membership organizations and
Mhm.
that was there obviously you finished your doctorate at Ole Miss and then had a couple other stops after that. Was there something that led you to make that move in the same way that there was when you got into recruiting, or what kind of prompted you to want to leave campus and get away from football, essentially?
Yeah. I don't know if I wanted to leave campus necessarily, but
Mm,
I did feel like my time in football recruiting was coming to an end. I knew that I wanted more. And the realities, especially at that time, were there weren't that many women working in football that weren't admin assistants. That is the reality. Now, obviously, that was years ago. So almost 10 years,
right.
time has flown by and things have changed. And I'm glad. But I'm like, I've gotten 3 degrees. Like I want more. I should be doing more. And so, again, the opportunity was presented to me to go work at Women Leaders and be the director of membership engagement. And I had already been an active member with Women Leaders. I served as a circle lead for the Women in Football group in particular.
Mm.
And it just felt like the right time. It felt like a good move. It felt like, hey, I can expand, the network I've already built and created, and I can move into a space that, would present a challenge for me because I've never worked at an association. And it's funny because when I left campus, similar to student athletes or just athletes in general, I felt like there was a loss of identity because
Mm.
that is all I had known myself to be, was this person who served in a college campus capacity. And now I am about to embark on a new journey that is unfamiliar, that I don't know where it leads. When people ask the question, well, what's next for you? There's no direct answer, which is scary. It's scary, but it was 1000% the best move I could have made.
That I want to pause on this for a second, because I think that is something that so many of us who have worked in college athletics for a significant amount of time
Yeah.
feel. I know I felt that when I was leaving the first time when I went to game plan a few years ago.
Hmm.
But that identity piece, in the same way that student athletes feel it, like it was a very familiar feeling to circle back up of like, well, I don't even know if I can do anything else. I've been, in academics and student athlete development for such a long time. And in your case, academics and football and recruiting. But I think that obviously those skills, just as we tell the athletes, are transferable. What would you say? I guess what advice would you have maybe for your younger self as you look back on maybe how scary that transition felt at the time?
Mm. I I do feel like I did this, but I would remind myself to do the hard thing.
Mm,
Um, when we get comfortable, it feels good. People want to feel good. I am excellent at my job because I've done it for so long. But like you said, similar to what we tell student athletes about transferable skills and what that means. I think sometimes, when you are in it day to day, it's hard to see that for yourself. It's a lot easier to preach that message to other people because you can see the potential, you can see where the growth happens. But when you are looking at things that you've done and where you are in your life, it's like, what have I done? Can I name these things off? Can I speak to that in the interview process? And, for me, I initially didn't, I, I felt like there was natural synergy just because I knew part of the role at Women Leaders was recruiting members. So there's again some natural synergy, but it didn't always feel that way, when you're trying to learn something new.
yeah, absolutely. I want to spend just one more second here on kind of the path, and then I want to
Yeah.
shift gears so we can talk about the work that you're doing now with the Pro Sports Assembly. But what is so with Women Leaders? I guess for those who don't know, essentially a professional organization for a member-driven organization for women who are working in sports. Relatively recently rebranded
Hmm.
from away from college sports to just sports now.
Hmm.
But they offer, again, member benefits, professional education, professional development, things like that. What, during the time that you were at Women Leaders, what's something that you're particularly proud of in the time that you spent there?
I was there during a time of transition. And, again, it's like the unknown, it's the fear of the unknown. You want to make sure, especially with the name change, for me,
Hmm.
the biggest piece, I my number one is to care about the membership. That is part of my role at the time. So I wanted to make sure that members felt like they were still, current members still felt like they were included in whatever the transition was going to look like moving forward. And I'm really proud of the interpersonal relationships that I created while working there and how those things were able to help lift and elevate the organization as a whole. Um, Sometimes you plant seeds, but you don't actually get to see them grow and be reaped and harvested. But I am very proud of the work that was done there with putting people in spaces and places that maybe they wouldn't have originally either been recognized or wouldn't have had a platform or um, just maybe weren't connected.
For sure. Yeah, I'm a product of that organization in many ways. Of course, that's where
Thank
we first crossed paths. I think that, at least in person.
you.
So grateful for that organization and the things that it does. But let's talk about what you're doing now with the Pro Sports Assembly. So I shared a little bit of an oversight at the very beginning, but maybe for listeners who don't know, what is the Pro Sports Assembly? Why was it created? What's the charge that y'all do?
So, ironically, our current CEO, Laura Dixon, she was one of the founders, along with a handful of other professional sport executives who recognized that there was a need for an association for people who worked in professional sports, whether that be at a team, league, union, or venue. And so part of what we do now is we are member led and member driven heavily, and we create a space for connection, for learning, for basically creating progress for the professional sports industry.
Mm, okay. And similar in the way that you mentioned you're offering education, you're offering
Mhm.
professional development. I think recently I saw something about a cohort that had launched. Do you guys use more of a cohort
Yes.
system where you're staying in from year to year, or how does that work?
So we offer, as it stands right now, we offer different cohorts depending on either discipline or depending on maybe interest or depending on it really just depends ultimately.
Sure.
When you're a young organization, you have the ability to be nimble and create things as necessary. And so I'm thinking the cohort you probably saw launched was People, Purpose, and Pay,
Mm,
partnership with Mercer. And that cohort in particular is dedicated to people who work in people and culture or who are looking to um, build total rewards packages or take things that they currently have and maybe shift them or um, adjust them depending on what they look like now. Now, the beauty of the cohorts across the board is that there will be a facilitator who they can connect with, but they'll also have the ability to connect with, again, other leaders at other teams, leagues, and unions. So if I work at the NBA, I'm not just siloed to only NBA people. If I work at the NFL, I'm not just siloed to people that work at the NFL. If I, work at an NFL team, I can pick up the phone if I'm the VP of partnerships and say, "Oh, let me call the VP of partnerships at MLS or at one of their teams." It creates that type of community that did not formally exist before this organization.
okay. And your role as the VP for member and partner strategy
Yes.
entails what day to day?
Oh my gosh. Every day looks different.
Sure.
We're celebrating 5 years this year, this month
Okay.
actually. We'll be in all year long. We're celebrating year 5 of Pro Sports Assembly being established. Um, my day to day, I have two components. I have the membership component. So, similar to what I did at Women Leaders, I am still recruiting new members, making sure that the current members are engaged in the benefits that are offered, and thinking of new ways to help evolve what we currently do to make it the best in the industry. And then the other arm, which is partnership, um, and to be clear, I am not doing this alone. We have multiple committees and governing board members and just members in general that help us execute on these things. Um, the partnership arm is more what partners align with the things we are trying to execute. So, trying to seek those types of organizations or companies out that are like, hey, I want to get in front of this group of people that I've never had access to before. So that
Mm.
part it's awesome though. I appreciate all of our partners and what they do and how they show up for members, because ultimately they're trying to also better the industry. So, and create a space that is long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a certain amount of like, do you work with a certain amount of partners to serve a certain amount of members? What do the numbers look like as far as
No,
membership and
not necessarily. I think nothing is more important than the membership.
mm,
The ultimate goal for us is to have every pro team, league, union, and venue in the membership. That ultimately is what creates a space that they all feel safe in, and that they all can call upon each other for, relationships and resources. Um, from a partner standpoint, it's there's certainly not like a limit or things like that, but we do try to vet, do you want to how do you as a partner manage authenticity while still trying to, advocate for your business. So, figuring out what that path looks like, and every path is different for every partner, and that's again the beauty of being young, is that we can bend and flex in those types of ways.
yeah, I have to imagine the relative newness of the organization
Mhm.
presents more opportunities, at least at this point, than the other way around. But
For
how
sure.
do you what are some ways that you guys are measuring impact and success when it comes to building stronger and more inclusive organizations in pro sports?
I think the easiest way to say, hey, are people in alignment with the mission, is whether or not they even choose to become members. I think that alone speaks volumes about the whoever that person is that is bringing the organization to the table and saying, this is something that we believe in and something that we need to be a part of. I
Mm,
think, when you think of the grand scheme of professional sports, a lot of it we can't necessarily control, right? We have
yeah.
to control the things we can control. And that means creating informed leaders who then turn around and take the things that they've done individually within pro and apply it to their organization, and then ultimately the industry as a whole.
Okay. I noticed as I was going through the website, Pro's website. So it one of the sentences that stood out to me on there was the Pro Sports Assembly facilitates inclusive collaboration on industry-wide issues such as leadership development and public policy to mitigate vulnerabilities. Obviously, sports has a ton of vulnerabilities, as do most industries and
For sure.
fields that you can work in. But what are some of the biggest vulnerabilities that y'all have identified across pro sports right now?
Oh man, man. I don't know if I would necessarily call this a vulnerability. I guess it could be considered that because it's still kind of new, but the the um, the way we are headed with pro teams not necessarily being family owned anymore and inviting private equity to the table is a big deal, because
Mhm.
now, you don't have like one single family owner. You have a multitude of people who have a say in what the team should do, how the team should be run, things that we're going to acknowledge, not acknowledge, what are our priorities. Um, that I think is a big deal. I also think, and don't quote me on this, but I think current legislative issues within just the US as a whole that go hand in hand with where pro sports organizations would like to head. I think those will be interesting to watch as they continue to unfold. Again, I don't, pro is made up, we have a management team, but ultimately pro is made up of the members. So it'll be interesting to see how that continues to unfold over the course of the next few years with um, how that affects ownership and how those things trickle down into the organizations and how they're again expected to show up or expected not to show up and do those types of things.
The private equity stuff is bananas, and it's starting to filter its way down even to the college ranks. That's certainly a conversation that folks are having there. But to hear it, I think, kind of in those terms of like moving from family ownership of teams and organizations into private equity, or a combination of the two in some cases,
Yeah.
is probably not something that most people outside of sports or outside of pro sports are thinking of. Do you, I mean, when it comes to, I guess, private equity, are you seeing that mostly in a board? That if it's a combination, let's say that there's a family member and there's a board, and then you're having to, as a team, answer to both? Or what is that? Have you even seen what it looks like yet?
I haven't, but what I can tell you, this topic is so timely because this past summer, we hosted the Assembly Leadership Retreat, which invites 200 pro sports executives to come, gather, have community, but also talk about relevant topics that are affecting them at their current organizations. And the topic this year was the art and science of navigating ownership dynamics. And so, timely, right? And so
Yep.
I think what I gathered just in hearing from some of the speakers from Forbes or Goldman Sachs was that while you have again originally these teams being owned by families, we are certainly headed into a space where as we move into private equity and the valuations of these teams continue to skyrocket at this point, you're seeing more and more people who are presidents or CEOs of professional teams having to navigate those spaces and what that looks like. So for current leaders or for people who want to be in the professional space, recognizing that you may have to manage, like you said, a family owner who's still on the board, but also a primary shareholder who's now, the president. You may have to manage what that looks like, and you may have differing opinions, and you may have to say, okay, how do I navigate this? What does this look like? And hopefully once you do get to that space, you have other colleagues that you've met through pro that you can lean on, you can call on and say, I know you've been in this situation. How did you handle it? What do you think I should do?
There's two things that I want to follow up
Mhm.
on this. One is the leadership retreat and some of the focuses that y'all have for more of your professional development. But the other, before I forget it, you mentioned the valuation of the teams, which
Mhm.
made me think of I think it was Unrivaled, which is the new
Yes,
3-on-3 basketball, which just came
yes.
out with like what
Mhm.
was it, 340, was it billion?
Billion. I think they
Yeah,
did billion.
valuation,
I'm like,
which
that's
is
crazy.
insane. I mean, it was like 3
Hmm.
billion a year ago at this time. And so to
Hmm.
see that skyrocket, the question I have is for sports and for members you have who are part of organizations that have existed for a long, long time, and to a certain extent, even though the WNBA is really blossoming right now, I think
Yeah.
it's been around for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
But for a league like Unrivaled and for folks who are working in that space, what are you hearing from them, from Love, from League One Volleyball, or from Athletes Unlimited and the softball league they just launched? What are you hearing from those members, if anything?
Um, well, for the sanctity of keeping the group private, I won't get into
Sure.
specifics, but I I heard recently on a podcast and I thought this was so true. The we're in a space where people like new and innovative ideas. It's not that, leagues or teams that have been around, since the inception, um, aren't going to do well. But the thought of progress, I think, is reflected. It's reflected in what we see when a league like Unrivaled goes from 3 million, to 30 whatever billion. I mean, that's crazy.
Right.
That shows that there is not only a desire for what people want, but people are also willing to pay for it. So I honestly, when I think about, again, leagues who've been around a long time, what does that look like for them? And I don't have the answer. I'm not a savant out here. But I do think that there's something to be said about taking notes from what all of these leagues that are popping up, like what they're doing right. What are the
Yeah.
things that they're doing that make sense so that um, some of the other leagues and teams can see that same success?
Yeah. It's an interesting time in
Mhm.
sports for that reason. I think the Savannah Bananas are another good example of
A
that,
great example.
where you've
A great
seen
example.
their again valuation, tickets. I mean, they're selling out stadiums that the teams who play there all the time are not selling out at that rate, and so it's just an interesting concept. I'd seen somebody the other day post about, could college football adopt a Savannah Bananas model to try and
Mhm.
attract more fans and sell out more stadiums. And of course, um, the main difference there is that the Bananas, to a certain extent, control the outcome of their
Correct.
games and the plays and when they can go on the field and these different things. So,
Correct.
but that's
Correct.
not to say that, there aren't things to be taken, certainly, from what they're doing. So
Yeah.
I want to go back to the leadership stuff. So some of the programming you mentioned, the retreat that y'all have, we talked about the cohorts a little bit. Are there specific leadership characteristics that y'all focus on when you are building out these programs for folks who work in the pro space? What does that look like?
I don't think it's a specific characteristic. I think it's more of a need. Um, a lot, well, I won't say a lot, but we have a part of our membership that is made up of people who work in HR.
Mm,
So, it makes sense to create a cohort that is dedicated to HR. I think figuring out, I mean, we do a member survey every year so that we can, find out what the membership is thinking, but trying to, you can't ever satisfy everybody. But I do think that um, ultimately it's about what the membership desires and what can we come up with based off some of those things that they've said. So it certainly isn't like you have to be a VP or you have to, have so many years in the industry. The pro as a whole is open to any full-time employee that's working again at a team, league, union, or venue. And we also have affiliate memberships for people who don't necessarily fit into that category, but we're servicing people from ownership down to coordinators. So you're trying to make sure that everybody feels welcome, everybody feels included. And I think that the cohorts that we have certainly get at that. Um, because there's lots of things for people who are interns or people who are just starting out in their career. I think there's so many lanes for that. Ultimately, though, we want to be able to build and produce executives because those are the people who are making the decisions. So,
Yep.
but all in all, I would just say we don't there it's not a specific like target audience besides the ones that I've already named.
Sure. Sure. All right, I'm going to ask one more question on this, and then we'll
Okay.
kind of shift into our wrap up. So, what is your perspective on the future of leadership in sports?
Mm.
What needs to change? What's giving you hope right now?
Ooh. Mm. Mm-mm-mm.
A heavy hitter to wrap up
Yeah,
this part.
it is. And it's not like it's a super hard question, but leadership is not linear
Mm,
and or linear, excuse me. And I think, I think when you're not sitting in the seat, it's hard to see that. What I do know, though, about what I really enjoy about leadership is that what I see just as I look out into the industry is people being creative,
mm,
people being inclusive, people trying to be the next best thing. And, we love progress. Who doesn't love progress? Now, what I think to that same end, I would like progress in other spaces to maybe be a little faster, but
sure,
ultimately, we can only again control what we can control. You give people information and you make a convincing argument, but at the end of the day, it is still their decision to make. And so, I think some of the slow progress is probably part of my like, I wish we could really fix that. But the things that I see, like the leagues popping up for women's sports and the different and creative ways that people are activating around games or around different events, that is awesome. I love that. That for me is, I'm like, oh, that is so creative. I'm stealing it.
it's been fun to watch some of the innovation that's happening lately.
Mhm, mhm.
All right. All right. Our final kind of few wrap up questions here. Do you have any final advice for folks who are coming up, who are interested in working in professional sports?
Oh, man. There's so many nuggets people have dropped on me over the years, but I had to whip out my notes because my memory is a little, shaky as I get older. But I think my favorite one that someone once told me is that giving is an opportunity to receive. I
Mm,
think that we are very much in a space as a society where it is all about me, 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 me. What can you do for me? And a lot of the reasons, even when I think back to my own career journey, not one time did I apply for the job without someone reaching out to me first saying, you should apply for this job. I'm going to recommend you for this job. And that's because I was a giver. I mean, I'm still a giver, but throughout the journey, I was a
sure.
giver. I understood that as you give and pour into things and places and people, those things give back to you. And it doesn't always feel that way. There's certain things that what I would like to achieve that maybe I haven't done yet. But what I do know is that when I show up in that way, I always get back tenfold. And so that would be my advice to those who are coming up is to, don't just reach out to people because you want them to give you something. You want them to give you advice, give you a recommendation, whatever the case may be. Recognize that the people you're reaching out to are also people too who need things and want things and there's a willingness there for mutual exchange.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, if you could get some hang time with any woman in sports, who would it be and
Oh
why?
my God. Oh, anybody. Well, I'm gonna go with my goat, Serena Williams, just because
Mm,
I play tennis too, and back then I would have died to be compared to her. What I appreciate the most about her, though, is that I feel like she's always stayed true to who she is, whether that be on or off the court. And that for me is unmatched. Like it's, we have the debates and the arguments of whether or not you should show up to work as your authentic self.
Sure.
And I for me, it's hard for me to switch. Like my coworkers, they could probably rattle off 5 things about me that hold true that have nothing to do with work. But that's because that's how I choose to show up at work. But what I respect about Serena is that even though she showed up as herself, she was always professional and she earned respect because of that. And that for me is like, I have to model my behavior the same way.
Yep. She is, I mean, what can you say,
I
right?
know.
A goat of goats, for sure. All right. Where can listeners get involved? Where can they support, follow you, Pro Sports? Where can they go?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, let's do Pro first. They can follow Pro on LinkedIn under Pro Sports Assembly, or find more information about Pro at prosportsassembly.org. And then if they want to follow me, gosh, I'm really, I get on social media for personal, but if they want to follow, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. I'm a comedian on there. I'm on Instagram at 2_ Dr.KK.
Hey, fabulous. Well, Dr. Kendrick, thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate it. It's been great to catch up.
Same. Thank you again for having me and wishing you an awesome day.
Thank you. All right, listeners, we will see you back in a couple of weeks. Until then, you can follow along at HangTimeP0D on Instagram, TikTok, X, and LinkedIn, and now YouTube officially. We'll see you next time.